The last time, smoke rose from the chimney of the frontier cabin. No one noticed. The cabin stood alone at the edge of the valley, where the trees grew thin and the wind never rested. It had been there longer than most of the people in town, older than the schoolhouse, older than the church bell that rang every Sunday. And inside it lived Eliza Moore, a woman the town had quietly forgotten. Winter had arrived early that year. Snow pressed against the cabin walls like a living thing slipping through cracks in the wood. The fire inside had burned low days ago. Eliza sat close to the hearth, her hands trembling as she tried to warm them, but the cold clung to her bones. Her breath came shallow now. Each cough felt heavier than the last. She had once been strong, strong enough to survive the frontier, strong enough to bury her husband with her own hands when the fever took him. But sickness does not care about strength, and isolation does not care about memory. The shelves were empty, no flour, no dried meat, no medicine. Only silence and the distant howling of wolves. After sunset each night, Eliza listened to the wind scrape across the roof and wondered if this would be her last. She didn't fear death as much as she feared being found too late, or not found at all. The town was 5 miles away. 5 miles might as well have been 50 then. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she heard footsteps at first. She thought it was the wind playing tricks on her mind, but the sound came again, heavy. Deliberate, real snow crunched outside her door. A knock followed, slow, firm. Eliza's heart raced. No one ever came this far in winter. She struggled to her feet and opened the door. A tall figure stood there, wrapped in a dark coat dusted with snow. His face was hard, weather-worn, with eyes that rarely showed kindness. It was Caleb Hart, the rancher. Everyone in town knew his name. A man who spoke little, a man who kept to himself, a man people respected but never trusted. He owned more land than anyone else, yet lived like he had nothing to prove. His eyes scanned the cabin, the empty shelves, the weak fire, the pale woman standing before him. "You shouldn't be alone out here," he said. His voice was calm, almost distant. "I can manage," Eliza replied, though even she knew it was a lie. Caleb didn't argue. He stepped inside, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud. The cabin felt smaller with him in it. "I heard the smoke stopped," he said, figured that meant trouble. For a moment Eliza felt relief. Maybe he had brought food, maybe help had finally arrived. But Caleb did not unload supplies. Instead, he walked back outside and returned carrying a shovel. Eliza froze. A shovel? She whispered. Caleb avoided her eyes. "I'll be back before dark." He stepped outside again through the small window. Eliza watched as he began to dig into the frozen ground beside the cabin. Each strike of the shovel echoed through the valley, sharp, hollow. Unsettling fear crept into her chest. Why was he digging? Was he preparing something for her? The wind held louder, as if warning her. And as the sun disappeared completely, one thought refused to leave her mind. Was the rancher digging a grave while she was still alive? The sound of the shovel did not stop. When night fell, each strike echoed through the frozen valley, slow, steady, merciless. Eliza lay awake on her narrow bed, staring at the low ceiling as the cabin creaked under the weight of the cold. Every time the shovel hit stone, her chest tightened. She counted the blows without meaning to, as if each one marked the passing of another hour of her life. When the digging finally stopped, silence rushed in like a held breath released. The door opened. Caleb Hart stepped inside, his face shadowed by lantern light. Snow clung to his boots, mud frozen along the edges. He said nothing at first. He simply set the lantern down, poured water into a small pot, and placed it over the fire. Eliza watched him carefully. "You didn't bring food," she said, her voice thin. "No," Caleb replied. That single word chilled her more than the winter air. He handed her a cup of warm broth. A few minutes later it tasted plain, but the heat soothed her throat. He draped a heavy blanket over her shoulders, one far thicker than anything she owned. "Sleep," he said. "I'll return tomorrow." She wanted to ask him why he was digging. She wanted to ask how long he planned to stay. But the question stuck in her chest. Fear has a way of stealing words. Caleb left before sunrise. By mid-morning the digging resumed. From the window Eliza could see the hole growing wider, deeper. The frozen earth piled up beside it like a rising wall. Each day Caleb returned at the same hour. Each day he dug, he brought water. Warmth and silence, but never answers. The town noticed. A rancher riding past the valley slowed his horse. A woman gathering firewood crossed herself when she saw the growing pit near the cabin. By the third day, whispers reached the main street. "He's waiting for her to die." One man said that land's worth something. Another replied, "Why dig unless you're burying the sick?" A woman asked quietly. No one went to check. Caleb's heart was not a man people challenged. Inside the cabin, Eliza grew weaker. Her hands shook when she tried to drink. Her legs failed her more often than not. Fever burned through her at night, leaving her soaked in sweat. Despite the cold, she dreamed of her husband, calling her name from somewhere deep underground. On the fourth morning, she could not stand. When the door opened, Caleb found her collapsed beside the bed, breath shallow, lips pale. For the first time, his calm expression cracked. He knelt beside her and lifted her with surprising care. She was light to light. Her head fell against his chest as he carried her. Outside, the cold air shocked her. Awake people were there now. Townsfolk had gathered at the edge of the clearing, drawn by fear, suspicion, and curiosity. They watched in silence as Caleb carried Eliza toward the hole. Someone shouted, "Stop!" Another yelled, "She's still alive." Eliza tried to speak, but no sound came out. Caleb lowered her beside the pit. The hole was deeper than she had imagined, dark, wide, and waiting. The crowd murmured, some turned away. Then Caleb took a shovel and struck the ground one final time. The dirt gave way not to emptiness, but to wood. A hidden door revealed itself beneath the frozen earth. Caleb reached for the latch, and in that moment, the entire town realized something was terribly wrong, or incredibly misunderstood. The crowd fell silent as Caleb's heart brushed the dirt from the wooden door. It was not a coffin, it was not a grave. The hinges creaked as he pulled it open, releasing a wave of warm air that rose from beneath the frozen ground. Steam curled into the winter sky, carrying the scent of burning coal and dry wood. The people closest to the pit stepped back in disbelief. Beneath the earth was a room, a carefully built shelter lined with timber. Sealed against the cold, an iron stove glowed softly inside, its fire still alive. Shelves along the walls were stacked with preserved food, blankets, and jars of medicine. Everything was prepared, measured, deliberate, done with care. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Caleb knelt beside her. "The ground stays warmer down here," he said quietly. "Storms can't reach it. Wind can't touch it either." With the help of two stunned townsmen, he carried Eliza into the shelter and laid her on a bed of thick quilts. The heat wrapped around her like a forgotten memory. For the first time in weeks, her shivering stopped. No one spoke. The rumors died where they stood. Caleb closed the door halfway and turned to the gathered crowd. His voice was low, but it carried. "You all remember her husband," he said. "Jonah Moore." Faces shifted, heads nodded slowly. "5 winters ago, a storm took my horse and left me stranded in the pass." Caleb continued. "Jonah found me half frozen. He dragged me 3 miles and gave me his last blanket. He died 2 months later." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I don't forget deaths." The town had nothing to say. For weeks, Eliza lived beneath the earth. Caleb came every day bringing food, medicine, fresh water. He spoke little, but his presence was steady. Slowly her strength returned. Her cough faded, color crept back into her cheeks. When spring finally broke the frost, Eliza walked out of the shelter on her own. The town watched her return, like someone raised from the dead. But Caleb's heart did not stay to receive praise. One morning, the rancher loaded his wagon and rode out. Before sunrise, he left behind a signed deed. Half his land transferred into Eliza's name, enough to ensure she would never be forgotten again. Years passed. Drought struck the valley hard. Crops failed, cattle died. It was Eliza's land, once Caleb's, that saved them. Water lay beneath it, hidden deep just as the shelter once had been. People spoke Caleb's name differently after that, not with fear, not with suspicion, but with respect. The frontier has a way of revealing truth too late. It tests people in silence and lets judgment grow faster than understanding. The old cabin still stands, and beneath it, The earth remembers the man who dug not a grave, but a second chance at life.